Why would we care to learn about how to observe the wilderness? It's a funny thought, right? As most of us, all of our lives have been using our eyeballs. Let's explore that. Like me, I'm sure you've bumped into people along the trail who have walked past something that you perceive as obvious, but they didn't even notice it. Or maybe you've walked along the path and not realized where you've taken yourself. This is common for people who go into nature for activities such as sport, adrenaline, or hiking. How is it that a great sniper is able to see with far more detail and spot things in the wild better than most? Or that some hunters can just have a sense for where their prey lies, or some people just have a knack for seeing things first? Sight is a skill, and let's develop that. What seems sometimes like 1,000 years ago in a land far, far away, I was a reconnaissance patrol commander. And what that meant was that I was the leader of a team of men who specialized in reconnaissance, gathering information, observation, etc. And we highly developed our skills to be able to observe our environment, and that could be enemies, civilians, the nature, the patterns of life that were in the area of operations, whilst ourselves placing a significant focus on the ability to remain undetected and unobserved. So whether it was on operations in Afghanistan or in training missions in the jungles or the subtropics of Australia, we would just spend days living through our senses, observing our natural environment as if our life depended on it, because it did. And this was in scenarios such as patrolling in the fields or the streets, or in an observation post where we would be stationary looking out for hours and hours, recording information of what we saw. So we were really able to hone in that skill, the sense of visual observation, as well as others. But for the moment, we're just exploring the sight. I'm no longer in the military anymore, but there is still significant value in this skill, and it has served me many a times in my life in the wild, connected with nature. So today I will share with you some cool and practical techniques for developing the skill of observation in general and specific to the wilderness. So our eyes is usually the primary sense through which we interpret the world around us. The eye has a blind spot in it. And what that means is that when the data is gathered from your eye, there is a section which is blank when that gets communicated to your brain. What happens is your brain fills in the gap around your eye based off what your brain interprets should be there. It is a little bit more complicated than that, but that's enough for us to understand. Now let's do an exercise. So in this exercise, we're going to identify the blind spot in the eye. What I want you to do is to take your left hand and place that on top of your left eye. Extend your right arm out straight with your thumb around about nose level. With the gaze from your right eye, I want it to be looking through your thumb into the distance. Keeping your gaze fixed through your thumb into the distance, I want you to start to wriggle the thumb on your right hand and slowly take your thumb out to the right. It's subtle, but what you'll notice is that the tip of your thumb will disappear anywhere from about 8 to 20 centimeters as you extend it to the right. As soon as you look at your thumb, the thumb tip reappears because the blind spot moves. So what's happening here is that there is a blind spot in your vision when it gets to your brain, and what your brain is actually doing is making up what it thinks it should be seeing, and infilling data based off that assessment. So if you swap eyes and go through the same process, the result is going to be very similar. Have you ever read a meme on social media or the internet where the letters were replaced with characters and numbers, but somehow it still makes sense? If you were taught to read from left to right, that means that your brain has been conditioned to fill in gaps of information when you are looking from left to right. So if we want to see more accurately in nature or anywhere, we're best to scan the environment in the opposite direction that we were taught to read in. So for most of us, that will be scanning the environment from right to left, going from the near ground to the middle ground to the far ground. This is, of course, a skill which needs to be practiced and developed until it becomes embodied and second nature. So let's get practicing. The next method is something I call Stow. It's simple: stop, turn, observe. However, this can be quite frustrating if you're used to walking quite fast or going with the focus on getting to the summit, the peak, from A to B, etc. There is a bit of a trade-off with awareness and pace. Depending on how aware you want to be of the environment that you're walking in, will depend on how you manage the pace, the speed at which you travel. The slower you walk, the greater the opportunity for awareness. With this Stow method, usually I will stop every 50 to 100 meters to stop, turn and observe. If I want to progress faster, I will do that less frequently. If I want to be more aware, I will do that even more frequently. This method is a descendant of a patrolling technique that we would use and that would tie us into our environment, because something like this was crucial for us to survive, our ability to be aware. And this method allowed us to observe constantly what was occurring around us. So generally, the faster you go, the less detail you can observe. So you may ask, Lex, why do I want to look at where I've been? I'm not going that way. So my thought is, like the fox, it lives through its senses in the natural environment. And when we stop, turn and observe, we can soak in more of the stimulation and the feedback of where we are. Looking at a tree from multiple different angles or a river allows us to recall more detail there, but it also gives us a better understanding of what is present. It's also possible that when you stop, turn, observe, you may heighten some of your other senses. You can hear things from different angles. Can you smell anything different? These are really good questions to ask yourself as you practice this method. There's definitely been enough situations in my life where having an understanding of the path behind me, as well as the natural resources and the lay of the land, have been advantageous. One example is having to go back on a path that I didn't think I would have to cross because of an emergency situation. Again, have a practice with this, play with the skill, have a go, and let me know how much more you can observe after doing this for some time. So simply, as I'm walking along the path, every 50 to 100 meters, I will stop, turn and observe. And as I'm turning, I will scan right to left. And then I go again. This is a really good example of the little things which can just be overlooked if we're traveling too fast. Here is a dwelling of a creature of the forest, and we can see a couple different entries, but you can see here it looks like the vegetation has been patted down. That's because it has been patted down. This creature is moving across this entry backwards and forwards, and it's an indicator that under here is a burrow or a habitat It's super common to be focused on hiking quite fast and moving through the forest so fast that one can only really concentrate on the path and the footing placement. This is a really cool exercise to just zoom in and focus on some of the micro details of the forest or the bush or the beach, wherever you are. This is referred to as micro observation. And what we're going to do is we're going to primarily focus on something 30 centimeters by 30 centimeters, and we're going to observe that patch of earth for 15 minutes or so. And what we will see is that the earth, the forest, the beach, whatever it is in some way teeming and wriggling with life. It can be as simple as observing the erosion of dirt or sand, or seeing the blade of grass flexing in the wind, or something as dramatic as an ant battling a moth to the death. Whatever it is, you are honing in your senses to focus on the smaller details that are present in nature, which are under every footstep. That 30 centimeters by 30 centimeters is everywhere that we look in the forest. Life is everywhere, but we often overlook the smaller details. So put your screen down and zoom into the live feed from Mother Earth. The channel is always on and it's always available. Whilst some of these skills have been born out of a necessity to survive, for me, they're now about deepening my connection with Mother Earth. I hope you've had value from this session today. Remember, for these skills to be effective, they need to be sharpened. So keep sharpening them. That's it from me. Back to you in the studio.